A fight between a hero and an opponent can look like this and this.
You're using Bonetti's defense against me, huh?
I thought it fitting, considering the rocky terrain.
Like this and this.
I admitted you are better than I am.
Then why are you smiling?
Because I know something you don't know.
And what is that?
And sure, the first one might be the more exciting one to watch on the big screen, but when it comes to a D&D encounter, I think I know which one I'd rather have. This video is the second of 3 where I talk about how you can improve combat encounters in D&D. And today we're going to look at how you can improve combat through one of the, perhaps the most essential parts of combat, the opponents. The most important part of a combat encounter is, without a doubt, the opponents, because without them, there wouldn't be an encounter. This means that opponents are the best way to inject excitement into your combat encounters, and here are 4 ways that you can do this. Tailor your opponents to the party. This means that you make an opponent by looking at the player characters that are going to face them. Each class and character in D&D has this built-in fantasy when it comes to combat. And if you can identify these fantasies, you can make the opponents cater to the party. Barbarians want to fight a bunch of enemies at the same time, taking all the hits for the party, shielding their friends, while also hitting their opponents with big weapons. So if you want to build an encounter that caters to the barbarian, make sure that the main opponent is a melee fighter. And if there are more of them, make sure that the majority of them are melee fighters. This will make it easier for the barbarian to act out their role. And fighters might want to use combat maneuvers, and if they have the ability to disarm their opponent, make sure that as many of their opponents as possible carry weapons. Even enemies that don't usually carry weapons could do so. For example, a clay golem could wield this large mace, or a wizard could be casting their spells visibly through their staff or a wand, all of it providing opportunities for the fighter to disarm them and make them less dangerous. Monks in the 2024 rules have a lot of mobility, so maybe have slow enemies that really allow them to take advantage of this so they can sort of dance in and out of combat, landing a hit and then getting out of the way. Rogues want to fight, but they don't want to do it in the front line. So maybe make a high priority target that the rogue can sneak up upon and take out. It could be a spellcaster that is raining down spells upon the party, or maybe healing the other opponents. The core casters, wizards and sorcerers have access to a lot of different types of damage, so make enemies that are vulnerable to these types, which will reward the players for figuring out their opponent's weaknesses. Clerics are often in the business of smiting evil, so give them some opponents that are truly unrepentant. And also, one of their core mechanics focus on the undead, so try to figure out ways to include this type of enemies more in your encounters. Druids have various ways to master nature, so maybe have an opponent that is already half taken over by plants, which the druid can then boost to crush their enemy or root them to the ground. Of course, each class has a lot more going on to them than these simple examples, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how to approach this. Each subclass alters the characters in ways that gives new opportunities to tailor the opponents to them. So basically, take a close look at the player characters and see if there's a way that you can make 1 or 2 of them shine in each encounter. And now, the next way to improve opponents is give opponents unexpected abilities that stretch the rules. Here's the thing. The players are bound by the rules when they play, but you as the DM don't always have to abide by the book. After all, your job is to make an exciting story and combat encounters, so you are allowed to do a little bit of shenanigans behind the DM screen. And just to clarify, I'm not advocating for throwing the rules out of the window and becoming this power-hungry DM that turns up in horror stories, but rather stretching the rules into interesting territory. A rule of thumb is that if whatever you're doing makes the player's experience better, then it's probably alright. And now to some examples. What if an opponent has the ability to cast Misty Step as a reaction to being attacked, allowing them to get out of reach before the attack lands? This forces the players to figure out a strategy on how to pin down their opponents, perhaps by focusing one target at a time, or maybe using the anti-magic field spell in a high-level encounter. What if an opponent uses arrows that are tipped with Alchemist's Fire? If they hit a PC, they will be set on fire and they will take damage at the start of their turn. This presents the player with this little choice of putting themselves out or using their actions to make an attack. Other arrow attachments are available, maybe lightning rods or poison vials or something similar. Or what if the deceased rats that the party is fighting explode upon death, showering everyone nearby with poison damage? The party would have to figure out a way to take them out in a safe place, or maybe knock them out without killing them, or something like that. Basically forcing them to strategize. What if an opponent could disguise themselves as one of the PCs, with voice, appearance and everything? The players would put in the dilemma of who to trust and who to attack. What if an opponent turns to solid iron at the end of each of their turns, making them basically indestructible, and then at the start of their turn they turn back to normal and can hit out at the players? Basically, you kind of want your players to shout "this is bullshit" once in a while, without it actually being bullshit. A way to keep these alterations within what seems fair according to the rules is by basing these abilities on already existing spells, features and items. For example, the opponent that turns into iron is based on the flesh to stone spell, and the alchemist fire arrows are based on items from the adventuring gear section. And now to the next way of making opponents more interesting. Make them talk. The first two ways have focused on the mechanics of the opponents, but now let's look at their behavior. A talkative opponent has two advantages over their more silent kin. First of all, they are more engaging to the players, and secondly, they provide roleplay opportunities during a fight. If an opponent is taunting the PCs at every turn during a fight, the players are likely to retort in character, which might make them realize that this is a thing that they can do. That talking is always a free action that you can do at any point during a fight. But how can you make an opponent more talkative? The opponent might do the classic villain thing, where they just can't help themselves talk about their plans, or at least parts of them, even while fighting the party. This might be a flaw on their part, but it could also be a way to manipulate the party by letting them know specific parts of their plan that they want them to know. Or the opponent might try to convince the party of their innocence, true or not, even while they're fending them off in a fight. So not only do they attack with their weapons, but also with compelling arguments as to why the player should let them go. Or the opponent might be old or even ancient and compare the actions of the PCs to things that they have already seen in the past. Perhaps they praise them for their originality, or scoff at them for their lack thereof. As the opponent dodges or parries one of their attacks, maybe they shout at the players, "I have seen that move 1,000 times, show me something new." This makes the eventual hit a lot more satisfying, or it might push the players to think outside the box. The opponent could also reveal parts of their backstory during a fight, mixing exposition with combat. Maybe they say how easily they could have defeated the party if they had their old friends with them, which reveals that there might be other similar opponents on the horizon. Maybe they want to get the whole gang back together and fight the party or something like that. Foreshadow. Or the opponent might just comment on the fight as it transpires. Imagine fighting the narrator from Darkest Dungeon. A heavy blow draws blood, but weakens the steel. And then cut to the opponent breaking one of the player's swords. Foreshadowing. Or maybe they comment on a natural 1 on an attack roll with something like a moment of bravado. Easily turned to folly. Basically, any way that you can make the opponents talk will be good, because it gives the players another way to interact with them apart from the actual fighting. A social layer on top of the martial one, if you will. The last way of improving the opponents is also about behavior. Have the opponents use the environment. In my last video, I showed how you can use the environment to improve combat encounters, so now let's look at how the opponents can use it specifically. The most basic way to use the environment is for the opponents to take cover. An opponent who steps behind a door or a pillar at the end of their turn forces the players to maneuver against them. Either they have to move up to the door in order to actually see their opponent, or they have to move sideways around the pillar, which might bring them into traps that the opponents have laid out expecting this move. Another basic way is to have the opponents use elevation to their advantage. This is similar to cover, since the edge of a roof basically becomes a cover that they can hide behind. Elevation also makes it difficult for the PCs to get to the enemy, forcing them to figure out a way how to get up there or to hit them from a distance. A more dramatic way to use the environment could be for the opponents to push the PCs into fire pits or vats of acid, or perhaps into that priceless Scholzen vase that they've been tasked with protecting with their lives. These moves might not be as effective as just a straight up attack with a weapon, but they make the fight more interesting, and they might be a way to make a really strong opponent perhaps a little less lethal if you need to balance on the fly. Or an opponent could light things on fire, either to prevent the players from escaping or to make their own escape more easy. Fire is also a great way to escalate the environment. As the flames spread, they restrict movement and threaten the characters and opponents alike. Bonus points if you make the opponents have resistance or even immunity to fire damage, literally forcing the players to fight them in their own element. Basically, look for ways to use the environment to create more problems and obstacles for the players to solve. And as I mentioned in the last video, opponents are a great way to show the players how they can use the environment. Maybe the players will start to look for elevation in a fight, or throw their opponents into spiked walls instead of just hitting them with their sword. So to conclude all of it, think of a way to make one or two of the player characters shine in a given encounter by tailoring the opponents to their abilities. Give opponents unusual and unexpected abilities that stretch existing ones into unfamiliar territory. Make opponents talk during fights, and look for ways for them to take advantage of the environment as they fight the player characters. Now, you don't have to, and you probably can't, include all of these points in every single encounter, and that's fine. It'll just make each encounter stand out more. Like there was this fight with these very talkative pirates, or that other one where they just kept swinging from the rafters, making it very difficult to actually get to them, and so on. If you can just include one of these in any encounter, then you're probably good. And that is it for today. As I said, this is the second video out of 3 where I talk about how you can improve combat through various aspects of combat. So if you want to catch the next one, you can subscribe to the channel. You can also support this channel by giving this video a like and writing a little nice comment down below, or catching one of the streams I occasionally do. But yeah, until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you. Goodbye!